People push that you should have big successful businesses, or you should be driving this, or you should be living in this, and there's nothing wrong with success, I don't believe, but it's that pursuit of that. Why are you pursuing that? Why do you think that's going to give you purpose? And you're going to get to the top of the mountain, as an analogy, and still feel empty. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I have Sarah with me, and I forgot to ask how I pronounce your last name. So, how do you
Mayo,
pronounce your
like mayonnaise.
last? Okay, okay, cool. I'm excited to chat. We connected on social media. I think we've mutually been following each other for a number of years now. It probably because we both do cold exposure, and
Probably.
you're in Hawaii, and I'm not in Hawaii. I'm in a very cold place comparatively. But welcome here, Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're in a little less convenient of a place to do ice baths, but maybe more effective.
Yeah, I guess it depends how you look at it. In the
Yeah.
summertime, before I got my collaborative with mod tub now, before I got my mod tub set up, I just had to do cold showers and got a lot of ice, so it wasn't really cost effective.
Yeah.
But the winter time, that's perfect ice tub season.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's what probably caught my eye first. But
So, and I actually don't know your story with cold plunging. So tell me
mhm.
how you got into it.
Yeah, I mean, back in college, I think at the time, ice was like, oh, it's an anti-inflammatory, help athletes recover. I don't think we really understood it very well from a nervous system management perspective. But I would do it after, track practices, volleyball practice, etc. And I always just would feel so good. A lot of the athletes would just kind of like put their legs in or their arms in, and I would just kind of do the whole thing and just at least reap the benefits of it. And then I transitioned into being a CrossFit athlete. And I guess I did it maybe once in a while, not all that often. Again, didn't really know a whole lot about it. But then I had gotten really into breath work, both from like a performance standpoint as well as stress management. Part of my testimony is just that that kind of quickly turns to like a new age spiritualism. I had grown up in the church, but really kind of veered far off from that. And as I was like going into this breathwork journey, if you will, really just started to have my spiritual awakening, my come back to Jesus moment. And then around that time, I was working with a coach and mentor who had really been like diving into the neuroscience of things and nervous system management. And we had gotten together in Europe, we're coaching these seminars, and I was part of that team and had met up with, I'm sure most of your population would probably know who Wim Hof is, his science guy, who basically explained, why the things that happen to Wim happen the way that they do. And we had all kind of gotten together and brainstormed how these different areas of cold exposure, this neuroscience aspect, the breath, how does this really all tie together? And so that was when it really kind of clicked for me. And so obviously with Casper, we did start doing a lot more ice baths. And so I think that's where it really started to become a more regular part of my routine again. And then as all of that story, obviously I'm kind of like floating at 2,000 feet here, but as that really kind of came back to my testimony and what that meant of my relationship with God and exploring my relationship with Jesus, really just came to realize how much of all of this is tied to our spiritual being, our relationship with something so much greater and outside of ourselves. And so it's definitely become just a part of not only my physical practice, but that that spiritual depth as well.
Right. And you mentioned, so you grew up in the church, and then you said spiritualism, and then you found
Mhm.
Jesus. So tell me a little bit about that whole transition.
Yeah, I would love to. It's a good story. So, yeah, I grew up very, conservative, Christian, evangelical model. Parents, really like I think raised me up in a very fantastic way. It was very personal to me as a kid, but then I went through a traumatic series of events as a kid, and I think that really just started to bring a lot of turmoil in my life. And obviously, now we can have understandings of the way that that impacts just the physiological aspect of a person. And so I would say my faith really became non-existent, very impersonal, distant relationship with God, if anything. I think maybe at one point I might have said I was an atheist or agnostic. I just kind of had stopped categorizing it as anything. At the same time, kind of that 20-year span, I had a lot of mental and emotional turmoil. I think if you wanted to put it into terms of like psychological terms, you could call it schizophrenic episodes. Really, it was just the experience of the demonic in my life. And so breath work really at first felt like a bit of relief or freedom where my life had just really become chaotic. I was certain that I was going to die by my early 30s. Um, my breath was something I did not have control of. My body was something I did not have control of. And I really funneled that into sports for sure. Like just really going intensely after these physical goals and trying to master and aggressively take control of this thing I felt so out of control of and had so much pain and suffering in every single aspect. And so I started with the Patrick McCowan Oxygen Advantage book. It just takes a very physiological approach. I was excited about how that could help with performance and really just started like integrating that into my training. And I had a lot of disposable time at the time. I was working or coaching and mostly training full time, and so I had hours a day to practice breath work and kind of tied that in with mobility work and fascial release. And I started to have some experiences that were just for me very supernatural, very hard to explain. I wasn't intentionally trying to engage with any sort of spiritualism. I was very distant from any of that. I kind of knew that what I could control and what I could do and what is right in front of me is real. But I did start to have these experiences that I just couldn't explain. These both physical as well as, if you want to call it, metaphysical. I'd been, like I said, I'd been having these demonic episodes for 20 years of my life, and suddenly there was just this shift in the atmosphere, if you will. And I would experience out of body experiences. That's very common associated with the sort of trauma I had as a kid. I know that that's very common in kind of the new age breath space. But again, I had no context for any of this being things that anyone else experienced. It was just simply my little thing that I kept in a box and was my escape from reality. And it was in one of these out of body experiences after an experience at my sister's church where I started going to, really because it felt very non-threatening. I felt like I had a good grip on what I thought about life and why I exist and all these things. And so I just went as a way to socialize. And they were on a series called Breaking Free, and the pastor had shared this story, just the basic salvation story, right? About like the burdens of sin that come in our lives and the experiences that we go through, the way that that burdens us. And when we invite the salvation of Jesus in our heart, how that releases us from the bondage. And so I had really started to dive into the science of maybe what I was experiencing and trying to explain it and understanding the way that trauma stores in the body and the fascia. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to go talk to this pastor. He's so close. He's just using the words Jesus and salvation and the cross and sin. But what he actually means is like nervous system management and fascia and trauma and all this sort of thing. And so I was convinced that I had hacked my way into heaven, basically. And long story short, one plus one didn't feel like it equaled two anymore. And I, as I did at the time, really projected out of my body to just kind of escape this or try to process it. And that was where I encountered the Holy Spirit. I wasn't looking for it. I think it's just the grace of God that encountered me right where I was at, just trying to seek and like just genuinely asking the question, like, what is even real anymore? And it was like the breath I had been waiting the last 20 years of my life to take. And I just felt so filled with like this pure love in that moment. Um, just such this healing experience. Like I saw my face in the mirror differently from that day. Those the panic attacks I'd been having for the last 20 years were done. Those demonic experiences done, the voices done, everything just absolutely shifted. And so that was a change for me of, okay, well, if that's the Holy Spirit from the Bible that apparently I had no context for, what does that mean about God and Jesus? And what does that mean that I actually believe about my body, not just being this state of consciousness floating around, but what does it mean to actually have a relationship with the divine and that being found through a relationship with Jesus and applying that in my life. So that would be the umbrella
Amazing.
story of my testimony, how I got there.
That's really cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool. So then you held on to cold exposure, obviously, and you are an athlete. What sports did you play?
I played everything growing up, but um, in college I played track and field as a heptathlete and then volleyball. And then after that, I went right into CrossFit. So really just had been a lifelong athlete. And a lot of this really made me question, like, well, what is my actual identity?
Right. And then you've used this story into a lot of different things you're a part of, right? You said point one vision, full armor, and the other one you mentioned was
Oahu Pentathlon.
okay. Do you share your story, or is that your story a part? Your coming back to Jesus a part of that story too? Or tell me more about those initiatives you're a part of.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I was competing in CrossFit. I would say I was a surviving athlete, but surviving off of small contracts and sponsorships and sort of thing. And very much where I'd put my identity. And again, had this real coming back to Jesus moment and like, what does this mean of what I'm doing with my life? And I'd say one of the like greater leaps of faith I took in that was, okay, I'm gonna go back to the drawing board on this, kind of like wipe the slate clean. I stopped competing in CrossFit, moved back home for a while, went and took care of my grandparents, and really just let go of the whole fitness and athlete thing. And then at one point, it really just felt that God kind of went like, "Hey, I'm gonna give this back to you, but we're gonna do it my way." And so that kind of ended up launching the start of Point One Vision. A big question I had at the time, which is, as I mentioned, kind of like what I really resonate with you is, am I going to do all of this stuff, this breath work, the nervous system management stuff, like kind of like the at least the heart level stuff of it, and on the side, I just know that I have a relationship with Jesus and I'll let that like kind of, secretly influence what I'm doing. Or on the other hand, am I just going to go all in on Jesus? It was just, do I take everything and put Jesus on the side, or do I put Jesus first and potentially leave everything else behind? And obviously the option ended up, or the choice ended up being to just bring Jesus at the forefront of everything. And so that was really kind of the start of Point One Vision as just this, greater ministry and nonprofit organization of what does it mean to be strong to serve in mental, physical, emotional, relational, spiritual capacity. Um, I would say the passion of my like life's work, if you will, so far, is that full armor program within Point One, which is really taking this more neuroscience based approach to fitness, integrating ice baths and yelling and vocalization and strength work and mobility work and all of these different things, understanding the way that the autonomic nervous system works and tying that all back to a biblically grounded basis, and how does this actually equip us to be believers who are actually doing the thing that we say that we believe in, and actually like following through and having a deep intimate relationship with the Holy Spirit. I was in the I've been in the Proverbs lately, and I read this verse the other day. I'll just kind of paraphrase it, but basically it was the idea of like, when you come to the day of adversity, if you fail, then it is like a weakness of strength that it's really like our pursuit of wisdom and relationship with God is for those hard times, is to practice the hard things so that when you get there, you get to be a vessel to demonstrate the power of God in your life. And that's what all of this is for. It's not like exercise branded as a Christian thing. It's not fitness while you play worship music. It's not like wearing a Jesus t shirt or a cross necklace while I'm in ice baths and doing breath work. It is like this completely inseparable thing. Like, I am doing a disservice to people if I don't talk about the power of the Holy Spirit and the context of Jesus as I'm talking about breath work. And again, like, that's where I've just been so excited about the approach that you've taken to your business coaching and the way that you talk on social media and all the stuff it seems that you're doing, that it's just like, yeah, we can't talk about this. We can't give people the best of the best if we don't bring God into that.
Yeah, and that's so before we hopped on for people listening, we're talking about that, how we connected, and we both really respect each other for sharing our faith on our profiles. And I shared a post, I shared two posts pretty close together. One was how I was doing purpose coaching for men, and I wouldn't shy away from saying that I'm a Christian and this is what I believe, but I had difficulty coaching people who weren't Christians without saying that actually you're not going to have the full purpose you're seeking until you have a relationship with Jesus,
Hmm.
until you submit to that, until you believe that promise of the gospel and the cross.
Yeah.
And I can, because I can get people to have better relationships or have a more successful career or business or be in better physical shape. But in the end, all those can go like this, right?
Hmm.
I owned a gym through the pandemic and it almost all disappeared. And if I had put all
Hmm.
my identity and purpose, like you said, that identity piece in that, then who am I
Yeah.
anymore? And that's why I'm sharing it more and more, even if I lose followers. Like I think I've lost probably 5,000 followers in the past 2 months, net followers. So you gain and you lose, but I think I've lost 5,000 over and above. But it's okay because the more I share, and I never shied away from sharing, I never hid that I was a Christian, but the more I actually actively share on my profile, the more people I lose, but the more meaningful interactions I gain.
Mm.
I've had
Hmm.
two people sign up for my coaching, my business coaching, specifically because I shared that. It
Yeah.
had nothing to do, like, obviously, they know I have some knowledge or they wouldn't have invested in my program in business coaching and leadership coaching, but
Hmm.
that's why they connected. That's why they had that trust, right? And I think
Hmm.
that's something it's really difficult to know who to trust. And I'm not saying that I don't mess up. I'm still human and I'm fallible and all these different things, but
Hmm.
it's hard to navigate in that sea. And people are looking for people of character and
Yeah.
values, and that they can trust that they're actually the person they are on the other side of their phone. And because you can see a lot of
Yeah.
people, a lot of influential people that you don't actually know if that's who they are. And
Yeah.
they say that they have everything, they're happy and strong marriage and everything, but they're using it to just gain money.
Yeah. 100%. I think that's just like the such tricky, icky thing about social media that I wrestle with all the time, of recognizing like I don't have a huge following, but enough that it could be worthwhile having not just a positive vibes message, but having like the good news integrated into our weird social media culture. And then so I wrestle often with like, do I just totally get rid of this thing? But I think I like can connect so much with what you're saying of when I had, I came back to my faith and like, okay, I want to share about this. I was so scared because I had, different partnerships and brand contracts and stuff like that that I didn't know if I was allowed. It almost felt like I didn't own my own image. And I didn't know if I was allowed to represent these brands in a really personal way. Yeah, I think just social media is just such this monster. I wrestle all the time with the right way to use it versus do I just bomb the whole thing? And I think like what I was getting into was when I had my coming back to faith moment and started wanting to share about it, I was so terrified about putting that out, as silly as it sounds, on my Instagram because I had these brand partnerships and I didn't feel like I owned my own image anymore. It felt like it belonged to other people. And so I didn't know if I was allowed to talk about Jesus while I'm representing these brands and companies and things like that. And same thing, I probably lost a good 8,000 followers or something like that as over the course of me sharing. And that had really been like that trajectory of like Instagram growth and followers and brands and sponsorship. Like that was just like the trajectory that I was on. And so to feel this, like, okay, like I'm taking a in my mind, from that perspective, a step back. But what it ended up bringing me was such freedom because I realized that the people who that might bother to hear me talking about that or rubs them the wrong way or maybe even makes them angry or brings up hurts for them or whatever, I didn't have to worry about offending them to say anymore. It's like the people who stuck around, maybe they don't even fully identify with what I believe in, but in the very least, they're okay with listening to me talk about it. And those like little seeds are so valuable. And yeah, I think exactly to echo what you're saying, the quality of interactions like that. I mean, I think that's really why I intentionally reached out to you was seeing that like shift a bit and just being a little more forward about it. So yeah, I think it's just a weird monster to navigate as a believer and utilize it in a way that is glorifying and honoring to God and understanding it's part of our culture today.
Yeah. I mean, to for people who are sharing the message, the good news, to get off social media, I don't think it's necessarily the answer either, because then there's no one sharing the good news where people are mostly
Yeah,
spending all their time on their
yeah,
phone and they need that. They need that message. And I think that's it can be feel burdensome at some points, but then you realize, yeah, there's a lot of people who just aren't happy. And regardless of what you're going to share, they're just not going to be happy with it. They're actively searching. So one of my videos got 9.1 million views, and I was not prepared for that, but it was amazing to me to see how angry and how hateful some of these comments could be, just like from
mm,
people who have no clue who I am. And like earlier on, years ago, that would have really bugged me. But I can safely say at that point, it's like, well, no, I'm not trying to identify myself as, hey, I'm a better person now because I have 9.1 million views on this video. It just happened to catch the algorithm. Um, Also because there was some false information that I didn't know about that ice tubbing in that video. And that's the secret. If you want to go
way to call
viral,
yourself
you
out.
just share some information that people argue about. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
If you want to go to viral, just share something that people argue about, and then they have lots of arguments with each other. And then celebrities will comment on your post and it'll push it out. But it it really that was a cool moment for me because I was like, oh, I I didn't even remove the video because I was okay if people were saying that because I know who I am. I know where my significance is found. And if it's all gone tomorrow, it makes doing my business a little harder, but it would almost be a little relieving knowing, hey, it is what it is. I'm going to hold this with an open hand. And if it's something I should use, awesome. If not, then I'll find something else.
hmm I would think that, I mean, I think what I've seen from your story online is that you had a gym and then during COVID you lost it and took that hit and then kind of rebuilt. And so I imagine there's been a lot of freedom in kind of undoing your identity from all these things and in exactly the way that you're saying that you kind of coach these men of it's very ecclesiastic Ecclesiastes, right? Of like, it can just all be gone. It's like nothing but wind, it's nothing but air, unless you
Hevel.
know, yes, unless you just really know who you are and whose you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for people listening, the gym went through a lot of turmoil over the years of COVID, and we almost lost it and we rebuilt it back up. And before it, I had this huge, I actually got a 3D rendering of this building I wanted to create called the Blue Zone. And it was going to have a coffee shop, it was going to have a gym, it was going to have all these different things. I was like, this is the vision, this is what I want to create. And then all of a sudden to be like, oh, I don't even know if we can afford 3,000 square feet, let alone this huge, huge building.
Yeah.
And then it was freeing to know like it it recalibrated that pursuit for me. Like I think it was a prideful pursuit. I do think that
Mm,
I called it the blue zone. It was a prideful thing. I just wanted to grow it for the sake of growing it instead of really discerning and praying and being like, is this something I should be pursuing? Um, so I'm glad we've been freed of that. And we're actually in a smaller gym now, and it's a lot less
mhm.
stressful having a smaller gym. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. We, like, don't know what we actually need when we are busy focusing on what we want.
Absolutely. And just from our short conversation, I gather that you enjoy the wisdom books as well.
Yeah, I've really been in Proverbs a lot lately. I've been in Romans and then the Psalms even, like, the last couple days, just having some, like, tough spots and projects. And just I don't know, I think the personification of wisdom, there's just so many good things. Like, I was reading, I think it's, like, chapter maybe 23, 24, somewhere in there of, so I mean, the whole thing's obviously, like, hundreds, if not thousands of, like, Proverbs. But basically, like, King Solomon says, like, "Have I not given you, like, the 30 words of wisdom?" And then he lists, these 30 things after that. I've just been really stewing on those and kind of paraphrasing them and then highlighting, like, which are the ones that I really feel like speak to me. And it's just, like, so endlessly good.
That resonates with me. Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite books, and it it can feel depressing, like if you read it from the start, but it's
Yeah.
really not. It just puts everything to perspective, and it's really freeing. And I think going back to social media a little bit is there's a lot of people push that you should have big successful businesses or you should be driving this or you should be living in this, and there's nothing wrong with success, I don't think. I don't believe, but it's that pursuit of that, right? It's like, why are you pursuing that? Why do you think that's going to give you your purpose? And you're going to get to the top of the mountain, as an analogy, and still feel empty because,
Yeah.
oh, there I was listening to
Gosh, yeah.
A Tim Keller sermon slash podcast, late Tim Keller, and he said something that really hit me. He's like, "It's cosmic nostalgia." Nostalgia. Basically, we were created for something more. We're created for the garden, and we experience the goodness of God, but we can't experience the fullness here on earth, right? So we have
Mm,
this, like, that's why vacations never seem like they're long enough. That's why good good conversations, all these things, you're like, well, there, I need more of this, right? And all good things come from God. So it's always pointing us back to Him, and we can thank Him for that. And then it points us to the hope of the new heaven and the new earth, which is really exciting. And just that thought of, like, you're actually not going to be able to experience it here fully, but it's
mhm.
pointing to that relationship, that deepening relationship with Him.
Yeah. I've never really thought about it in this terms until you were describing it that way, but I feel like it's almost like the Christian stoicism, whereas, like, your more secular stoicism, if you call it, I feel like is a lot more of actually like a suppression or yeah, just more of a suppression, whereas the Ecclesiastes, it is that, like, that kind of sorrow and meaninglessness, but like all of that still rooted in a relationship with God. And so, yeah, I feel like for the stoic people in our lives who are maybe needing a little awakening, like maybe Ecclesiastes is a good place to point them.
I think so. And I like at the end, I'm paraphrasing, was something along the lines of eat, drink, enjoy, but know that you'll be judged for everything you do. So essentially, like obey my vows, follow my laws, enjoy my goodness, but know that
Yeah.
there's there's boundaries for these things.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really enjoy those books.
So good.
So good. So what is something you're working on? Tell me what you're working on right now that you're excited about.
Ooh, gosh. I feel very excited today. This is actually such a good day to record this podcast. I would say two things. One is Full Armor 2. So I mentioned the Full Armor program. We have like camp experiences right now, which we call Full Armor 1. I have an ebook, which really just dumps all of the, I don't really love using the words like philosophy or methodology. Theology isn't really the right word either, but essentially all of that in one place. But Full Armor 2 used to run on Zoom through COVID, but obviously we all got kind of tired of Zoom. This is the relaunch version of it essentially. So it'll be through the Teachable software platform. So people can do it self-paced. They can watch the videos and do the quizzes and engage with the community. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's really just going to help pick up some momentum of what the greater vision for this is, which is preparing full armor coaches. And yeah, it just, it feels like a big step in the overall vision. And then exciting thing number two is, so within Point One Vision as a whole, again, like our motto is kind of this idea of being strong to serve. And so using fitness as a way to, the term bridge the gap just feels so like lacking in it, but for lack of better terms, like bridge the gap between our faith walk and the physical body, that we are embodied beings. Is this body just like a temporary place? Yes, but it's the body that God gave us to embody this human experience and to interact with the world. Just like as a quick quip on that, learning to stay in my body has been one of the most like difficult commitments of my life, recognizing like this is where God has put me, and just with kind of that background I had shared. But so we have different like serve, we call them like serve mission teams or mission projects. And a really big one over the course of the last like 5 6 years has been building this community center in Katega. It's a very remote village kind of in the middle of nowhere, Uganda, Africa. And we finished a goat farm last year that's going to provide some entrepreneurial activity. We have some goals of like digging a well and like increasing the capacity and construction of their school and having a medical facility, just really helping create sustainable long term like live in solutions for this community. And one of the thing that we've been working on just very recently is starting a youth fitness program in partnership with a local church there, which means like putting a roof on the church, which has been without for like 7 years, getting gym equipment there to remote Africa so they can have a fitness facility essentially to use as a youth program to really like bring families together and again just build this center. And it sounds, I know it sounds so weird in some ways that we're building a gym in Uganda, but I can't tell you like how excited they are about this because it's the thriving, not just surviving. I don't want to just get them to be able to survive, even though they definitely need that, and we are providing for that, we're working on that.
Right.
But I also believe that Jesus wants us to thrive in our lives as well. And so anyhow, we were in a bit of like a fundraising pinch and have had some big breakthrough literally just in the last several hours even. And so I'm really excited about that. I could actually be heading over there really soon just to kind of bridge some of the logistics on this.
Amazing. You're busy. You have a lot going on.
Yeah, the last few years, I'm really trying to work on being less busy. I tend to I tend to be an intense person, and I'm trying to learn to be content.
But are you content when you do it? Do you enjoy it?
I do, but sometimes I don't know how to put a limit on myself and will just go, 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 go. I definitely do have I think intensity can be a tremendous gift. And I know that, like, it is the gift that God has given me. I can do a lot. And yet, if I don't stay alongside like what God is calling me in the way to use that, I can take it way overboard and just run myself into the ground. And then also use that as a way to, I think, try to like use works and earn my way and just, it can become, I think, a little bit frantic probably. So those days I have to take an ice bath for sure.
To calm the central nervous system down. I like to learn more about
Yeah.
people's giftings. What would you say your giftings are?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I think definitely that I've taken like spiritual gift tests. I'm the type of person that hates personality tests, so I will give the caveat of that. I'm definitely more of like a creative and yet have the skills necessary to bridge that into actually implementing things. Um,
Right.
Leadership was one of those, like being able to galvanize people. I'd say like that transition from my childhood into having those say demonic episodes and whatnot and then being redeemed through that definitely makes me like a spiritually sensitive seer. And I'm not saying I always have the best discernment, but in general I would say that discernment is a gift that I'm really learning to grow into through that, the way that God has redeemed the way that I see into the spiritual, I guess you could say. Trying to remember what else popped up. I shouldn't be able to answer. I was actually just thinking about this like last week, but I know that those are two areas that, yeah, God, like I say that I want to hold on to those things loosely, knowing that like as anything else, Ecclesiastes, right? Like even those gifts do not necessarily like identify me, and they're the ways that I feel like I'm able to let God move through me most. And I think shepherding had actually come up as one too, which I think kind of goes in line with like leadership or mentorship. Um, One of the things this year I'm really working on is like learning to delegate and empower other people to, step into their own gifting and me get out of the way by trying to do everything all the time.
Yeah, that's a thanks for sharing. First of all, that's an important thing as a leader, learning how to delegate. What would you say is your difficulty in that?
Probably a control issue. I I my ego would like to multiply 20 of me to do all the things, because I know that I can get things done. Um, but the part of me that's learning the way that God has just designed us for community and given people different gifts, the more I let go of my ego and myself, the more I see the gifts and talents and vision of other people making me better in every single way, making the projects that we're working on better in every single way. Um, so yeah, I think just letting go of control, learning to trust others as well as trust myself is a huge one. That's probably been one of the like greater themes in my life or lessons in my life is learning to trust myself and not in like a, inner intuitive, like I really like to delineate the difference between like the word intuition and discernment. I feel like it's a little bit semantics, but discernment to me is something directed by God. Intuition is something that is directed by my own power within, um, which is never going to be fully reliable.
Yes, I agree. And we can start to think of ourselves as, I mean, if you think when people say follow your heart, well, sometimes your heart is kind of deceitful, right? And you
Yeah.
you you need to be in the word. And I think it's a dangerous thing to say, well, this is what I feel. Well, does it line up with the word? And
Yeah.
sometimes your heart isn't truthful.
Yeah. And I think that's the ultimate humility. I think that like has to predicate what it means to follow Jesus is recognizing that no matter how hard I try, no matter what pursuits I follow to try to become more enlightened or become more spiritually aware or be more sensitive and, tackle my ego and all those things, at the end of the day, being able to recognize that I'm always going to fall short, and that's okay. It's not like a self-deprecating thing. It's simply recognizing that there's something so much more beautiful and powerful beyond me that I'm not going to attain again, like, I think our worlds very closely often parallel New Age spiritualism. And so you see people even acknowledging the Christ as a consciousness rather than a savior, but that fine line difference makes all the difference. Like sin isn't 180 degrees, it's 1 degree. It's that like tiny misalignment from what is capital T true. And I'm not going to pretend like I could attain the consciousness of Christ. 0% chance. I'm not going to try, although I will aim to be sanctified like Christ. But I would rather sit at the foot of the cross and acknowledge I'm never going to be there and allow like what the difference is Jesus's salvation steps in on my behalf on everywhere that I fall short. And so I think that is like one of my just like deepest desires and what I do with full armor is like I was saying, it's not just like all of this plus Jesus. It's an entire reframe of everything else that the world has to offer.
I love that. So people can find more about this on your Instagram. How do they find you on Instagram, Sarah?
Sarah Aiko Mayo. Aiko is my middle name, Aiko, Mayo like mayonnaise. Might be a little bit easier to look up point one vision, just all the words spelt out. And then full armor underscore is the other one as well.
Cool. No, I've really appreciated the conversation today. I want to have more conversations for sure. I think the
Yeah.
world needs more people. The kingdom needs more people like you sharing it unapologetically. And you encourage me to do that, which is great. It's good to have other content creators and people with a bigger following that are leading the way too. And that's encouraging. And it can be, it's small degrees, right? You use the example of sin as like a small degree change, but it's still so far away from the truth.
Hmm.
Um, but the same thing when you slowly start to go and be like, well, maybe if I don't share it as much, okay, now I don't share it as much anymore, or I don't even put it on my profile and then this or that.
Hmm.
And then you realize that then you've gotten into this caricature on social media of someone that is far from who you once were. And then you have to keep up this persona in order to keep your following. And that's what you've believed. And you don't know who you are anymore. So I
Yeah.
don't know where I was going with that, but if anyone's
And it sells
listening,
the gospel short.
yeah,
If what we're saying that we believe is as good of news as what we are saying, then like we should be shouting from the rooftops. We should be so excited. Everyone else is so loud about their own little, idols and gods and ideas and spiritualism and this is going to save you and the self-help. And it just like, I mean, just like we're not meant to be ashamed of the gospel. It's literally just like the power of God.
right. Absolutely. And the gospel is offensive too, right?
Yeah.
And that's I think people are scared. I'm not saying that I'm sometimes don't get nervous to share.
Oh
It
yeah.
doesn't feel good if someone says something.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's these things that are spiritual. There's these things that are people don't believe they're religious, but they're religiously following something and they have an ideology or
Hmm.
idol or God, little g, in their life.
Yeah.
They just don't realize it.
Yeah. And I'm really trying to even just be more okay with the word religious. There's such this like stink to the word religious, right? And I would say definitely like there is a very spiritual, to use that word, element to my faith. But I'm also religious in that I believe what I believe and I'm going to stick to that. And I don't think that that's a bad thing.
Yep. I don't think so either. And being religious in practices, I don't think that's bad either. If I'm
Hmm.
religious and going to my gym, why wouldn't I be religious in reading my
Yeah.
Bible and praying and doing these things?
It's
Because
discipline.
yeah, it's discipline. It's you're religious to something. Everyone, I think that people don't realize this. Everyone's serving something, right? You're
Hmm.
serving something. You can't not serve something. Even if you're serving an ideology of not serving something, you're still
Hmm.
serving that
Yep.
ideology of not serving the
You
truth.
can't escape it. It's like just the human condition.
Yeah, there is truth. There has to be truth. Because if you say there's no truth, then you say, well, is that true?
Yeah. It's like a dog chasing its tail or a hamster in the wheel or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if whoever's been listening, if you want to reach out to Sarah, I'm sure she'd be happy to chat with you. I'm happy to chat. You can find me on social media at Chenard. Show links. I'll put Sarah's information in the links. Sarah, is there anything else you want to say for those listening?
I think just like seeking after truth. I think whether that's as a person who's already a Christian who just wants to like that's like believe in Jesus isn't even like the end goal so much as like pursuing the fullness of relationship. And then for people who are just simply seeking and happen to make it this far in this episode, God can stand the test of your questions. And if you are truly open handed looking for the truth, God will make himself known.
Amen. This has been great, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining. I'll definitely have you on again. Have a great day.